Um, my name's Kevin Price. I live in Lawrence, Kansas. I used to live in a little town called Green River, Utah, but I was a professor at the University of Kansas, and so I retired here in Lawrence. The title of my talk is How to Germinate and Grow Spotted Bee Balm Seeds and Seedlings. Why don't we go to the next slide, Lee?
I'm working on it. There we go.
Okay, this is kind of a quick summary. First off, I've sent out over 1.5 million seeds in the last 5 years. And so I've learned a lot from people who have let me know what worked and what didn't work for them. As a quick summary, I've not had anyone who tried to use soil from their yard successfully get the seeds to germinate. It's probably because the seeds are sensitive to allelopathic biochemicals that are put out by the plants on the soils in their yards. Anyone who buries the seeds, they should know they will not germinate. They need sunlight to germinate. They like warm soil and die in standing water. And so I'm going to show you how to address some of these things. The soils that are alive work better. That what should have been there. The soils that are alive work better than the dead soils. Topsoil not autoclaved would be live soil, and potting soil is soils that they've autoclaved and cooked so they killed the components in the soils that make the plants want to germinate. Next slide. This is a drone view of the area where I first collected and found the plant. And when you go down, you see the long rectangle at the bottom of the slide. We're going to go down to there in the next slide to let you see what it looks like on the ground. There, if I go all the way along, if you look all the way to the trees, you can see spotted bee balm growing just on that sandy berm, and very few plants growing in other places. That is one of the walls that used to be there surrounding an ancient temple site. Next slide. Now, what I wanted to ask you is how many trees do you observe growing that these plants are growing under? Obviously, the answer is none. So people worry about, can it take the sunlight? If you don't put it in full sunlight, you're going to have a very unhappy plant. Next slide. This is a picture from North Carolina where the person that was growing the spotted bee balm thought it was too hot and sunny, and so he moved the plant that's on the right into a shadier area, and he kept the other plant on the left in the sunlight. And you can see what it did to that plant. Even partial shade is very difficult for this plant to do well in. They need full sunlight. Okay, next slide. Just wanted to show you that the plant varies in color. The two colors that I observe the most are the kind of the white or the cream color, and the other one is a pink. You see the petals coming out from the flowering head with the spots on it. That's why they call it spotted bee balm. And the seeds are in the little capsules. If you look on the bottom, you can see these green capsules. The seeds are maturing in those capsules. Next slide. One of the most important factors is getting the plants to grow is enough light. And some people want to go out and spread the seeds on the ground. If they do, they will have none or maybe a few plants that'll germinate. Ants love to eat these seeds, and they pack them down into their dens, and then they're in the shade, they don't grow. So I found that if I can put like 800 watts of an LED garage light above the plants, the seeds, by the way, the 800 watts in LED is only 30 watts, so it's not going to skyrocket your electric bill. But this is a light panel used for garages. and those panels can be folded up and down to make them aim the light in different directions. And you can get this at Walmart for about 20 bucks. Next slide. Here I've got 3 of them. 2 of them, the black ones on the outside, I ordered on Amazon for about 20 bucks. The white one is the Walmart one. And you see that it looks closer, but they're only about 1.5 to 2 feet above the plants, and I often will move them down to about a foot. So getting them close is important enough to get enough light. Next slide. If you go online on your cell phone, you can go to your app store. On the Android, it's called Play Store. On iPhones, that's supposed to be a PHONE. I think it's called the App Store. And this is the app on the left that you can see it in the pretty purples and pinks, and then the green oblong tabs. And if you look to the bottom, the second green oblong tab says PPFD. Thank you, Lee. It says PPFD. And if you go to the top, I've spelled that out. That stands for photosynthetic photon flux density, PPFD. Photons are packets of energy that come in from the sun, and flux is the rate that the energy is coming in per second. And so they measure how many photons are striking a square meter on the ground in a second. Now, I put my meter on my phone. You just point your screen upward and hit that button for the photons, the PPFD and DLI. You click on that button, turn your phone over, and face it upward so the screen is facing towards the light source, and it'll give you a reading like you see on the right hand side. And in mine, I had the lights down a little lower. It said the PPFD was 1022. We've had people that have bought grow lights from the different stores, and they were getting a PPFD of 100. You need at least 500 to 700 to get these plants to grow. So you need a light meter to make sure you're getting, and this is free. You just put it on your cell phone, get a light reading, and know if you've got enough light. If you don't, then you obviously need to fix the problem. Next slide. In terms of temperature, how much heat can this plant take? This is actually, I couldn't find another shot I had. I had one that showed that surface temperature of 140 degrees. And I plant the plants along the south side of my house in nearly perfect full sunlight, and they do very well there. So people are afraid of too much heat. They were in 140 degree surface temperatures and weren't even wilting. So the plant will take a lot of heat, get it on the south side of your house if you've got a lot of sunlight there. If you don't, then obviously you need to move it to someplace in your yard where it'll get a good amount of sunlight. And if that's the front of your yard, then this plant will be a beautiful ornamental. Go into the next slide, Lee. Okay, let's talk about getting the seeds to germinate. I'm going to show you in a minute. I planted about 1,000 seeds 3 days ago, and I'll show you what they're looking like today. But the trick is to get an $11.99 waterproof seedling mat, and you put that under the tray that you're growing them in, and it warms the soils. And I think that that's really important. Get those soils warm enough the seeds will germinate. Next slide. I'm going to talk about the soil here for a second. You see that there's Miracle Grow at $16.48 a bag. It's called potting mix. It can't call it soil because it's been autoclaved to kill all the germs, all of the diseases and the weed seeds in the mix. But in the process, they killed what's called the microorganisms. And these seeds seem to know if there's microorganisms in the soil or not. Next slide. So after 5 years of experimenting, I've come up with a mix, and I've given you some approximate amounts, but I just open the bag and I stick a shovel, a small shovel I have, into the bag and pull out a shovel full of sand. And I may, for example, the one on the left is topsoil. Notice it didn't say potting mix, it says topsoil. And that's what you want. If it hasn't been autoclaved, it's still alive. So I put about 5 shovelfuls into a 5-gallon bucket, and then on the cow manure I put in like about a half a shovelful, and on the sand, it's a coarse sand that you can get. They use it for play boxes for kids, and coarser sand is better than fine sand because it drains better. And I put about 30% coarse sand, and then about 10 to 15% coconut coir. And if you go to the next slide, I'll talk about this for a minute, and then I'm going to show you how you can mix this up real easily. Here's an example, a profile of a soil showing microorganisms. There's nematodes, protozoa, fungal hypha, bacteria, those kinds of things. Those are your microorganisms. So what they do when they cook it is they kill all those microorganisms. But those microorganisms are important. Many of them secrete acid that then interacts with the sand or the fine rock material and releases micronutrients. And micronutrients are needed by humans and by plants and everything to grow. And so if your soil has been autoclaved, it's not soil anymore, it's called dirt. Dirt is dead, soil is alive. Soil has microorganisms in it, dirt does not. And if you try to grow these seeds in dirt, my experience is I don't get any of them to germinate. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this one, I intentionally turned it upside down so you could read what was on the bag, but the far left is the topsoil, the middle is composted cow manure, the one on the far right that's in a red bag is the sand, and then on the far left side is coconut coir. It's ground up coconut husks, and it swells to 8 times its size. So if you put one of those bricks of coconut coir in a bucket, it'll suck up water and get to be 8 times larger than it is. And that's why it's really important. These plants their roots need to breathe. And if you put them in soil that doesn't drain, then you're basically drowning the roots and they'll die. So the sand helps the water to infiltrate through. And then you want to make sure that it has a way of draining completely out of the pot. And the coconut coir, or the cocoa coir, sucks up moisture out of the pore spaces between the sand particles and the soil particles. And it holds the water, and so the plant can use the water as it needs it, but it's pulled the water out of the pore spaces so the roots will live and breathe. And then I put down an example. I use a drill on that auger at the bottom that's black, and I just put all those things into 5-gallon bucket, and then I look like I'm mixing a cake. I just go in with that drill and just mix and mix and mix until it's well mixed, everything. The reason I tell you that, I had one person thought you're supposed to layer it, and so he'd layered one on top of the other, which is not the way you're supposed to do it. Next slide. Okay, this is this morning. It would be 2.5 days since I planted the seeds, and they're already germinating like crazy. I've got a tray that you put pots in to keep the water from running all over everything. If you just take and put your soil mix directly in the tray and then flatten it out really good and make sure it's damp as you put it in, and then just sprinkle your seeds right on top. And then I cover the tray with the clear plastic covering that comes with some of them to make it like a miniature greenhouse. And I let the seeds germinate. If we can go to the next slide. This is an area that's got a few plants germinating, but you see there's a grass leaf in there right next to the end of the tweezers. That tells you that that topsoil had not been autoclaved, or there would be no grass seeds growing in it. So if your soil doesn't produce weeds, your soil has been killed by autoclaving. Next slide.
Hey, Kevin, can I ask a question right there?
Yeah, sure, anytime.
Relative to this sterilizing autoclave soil, you're defining topsoil. Like you buy a bag, it says topsoil, and that is different than potting soil, potting mix.
Yeah, they can't call it soil because it's not soil. They have to call it potting mix.
Okay, so if I'm getting topsoil, if that's what's printed on the bag, then I can be assured it's not been sterilized.
Well, I'm not sure I can say that. I can just tell you that the topsoil that I buy at Home Depot that you saw in those bags has not been autoclaved, but I think that they do not autoclave topsoil.
Okay, so you're needing to look specifically for topsoil, quote unquote topsoil, rather than
Don't look anything that says mix. The reason they're calling it mix instead of soil is because the government will not allow them to call it soil. It's not soil.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead. I'll go to the next slide.
Please butt in anytime. Okay. So anyway, when that plant gets big and that weed gets big enough, I'll pluck it out with a pair of tweezers. Here I'm showing a pair of tweezers. These are straight tweezers. I prefer the ones that are reflexed or curved, but I'm just showing that what I will do is in a couple of weeks, I'll start moving those little seedlings into their own individual pots and continue to grow them. I get a lot of people want to buy them because they can't get the seeds to germinate for some reason. So I send them in the mail to them, and and I just go in, and there's obviously a bunch of plants that are growing too close together. And by the way, the worst weed to spotted bee balm is spotted bee balm because it competes for the exact same resources in the same manner. So what I do is I poke those tweezers down in. I make sure that the soil is wet, and then I poke the tweezers down and gently lift them out and tease them apart, and then just take them over and put them in their own little pots. You can go buy those little cardboard pots if you want, and just put them in that soil mix. And the reason is they really seem to need the micronutrients, at least when they're first getting developed.
So Kevin, what we're looking at here on this picture is this is after you've actually moved it from the tray.
In this case, I planted them directly in the burpees seed starting tray.
Okay.
So what I tell people to do is do as I say, not as I do.
Right. Well, these nuances are really critical. I've made probably every mistake that you just went down the list on, and maybe more before you're done. But as I'm looking at this, I would go along and I've got this traditional mindset, like if you were planting cucumber seeds, that you bury the seed, you put one per thing. And so I was not sprinkling them, in, I guess you'd say, in mass along a tray, to then go and with tweezers pick out the ones that actually made it. I would put one or two seeds in the middle of one of these cubes and then get disappointed, probably because I drowned it as well. But
if you've got the good soil mix, you can't drown them because it'll drain right out.
And do you have a hole in the bottom of these so that they can drain?
Yeah, you definitely don't want anything that won't drain, because over time, as you water, the water table get higher and higher until it drowns the roots.
Does that also apply to the tray that you started them all in?
Yeah, except that the tray doesn't have any holes in the bottom, or I'd be draining it all over my rug and so on. So what you do is you just water very sparingly, and keep a close eye on it. Now, my tray is 12 steps from where I'm sitting right now.
And so when you say you water very sparingly, what does that look like?
It's one of these things where you just have to develop a feel.
Right.
It's you if you see that, just just watch your plants. Your plants are the best indicators of whether they're getting enough water or not.
Okay.
And, but if you start seeing them getting soggy, you've got too much water.
Okay.
You want to do what you can to get it to drain out. But those roots suffocate in water. That's why they grow. That berm I showed you on the temple site,
Right.
you notice how well they're growing there? That berm is solid sand all the way across.
Okay.
And so
in this
they,
picture, I'm looking at green, a mat of green on top of that. So
yeah, there's a moss that's developing on that.
so that's okay.
Yeah, I guess I've never had the plant tell me they didn't like it yet.
All right. I just wasn't sure if we had to call you out on that or not.
Yeah, I don't know. The plants, what I'm going to do there is just stick it down alongside. I'm not going to go in at an angle like I am there, or I'll tear it all up. I want to go down and kind of lift it out, like I use the tweezers like a shovel, and just kind of lift it all up.
Okay.
And then you can take a little water and wash it to tease the soil off, and then gently pull them apart and just take where you're going to transplant them. Just poke a little hole with a pencil or something in there, and then drop it, get the roots to go down inside, and then squeeze the hole closed around it. Then once you've got a lot of them planted, go back and add some water. The water will move the soil next to the roots and keep them from drying out.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Okay? We can go to the next slide. I planted these on February the 7th, I believe it is. And you can see on the far left in the middle, there's kind of a washer there. That is about the size of a dime, to give you an idea of how big they are now. And they're big enough to start transplanting. I could transplant those. And I've transplanted, last year I transplanted in the middle of March. We had 4 heavy frosts where the temperature dropped to 20 degrees, and it didn't even phase them.
Wow.
These plants are made out of antifreeze.
So they're sitting here in the originally, you didn't move them into these 9 cups. That's what you started them there.
You can buy these little cups on Amazon, and they have a clear plastic dome that snaps on top. And then I make a little thick plastic cover that I slide. I cut a groove in it, allows me to slide it past the stem of the plant and put it right on the ground. And then I use bubble wrap to press it down, and then tape to hold the bubble wrap in place so that the plastic sleeve won't come up. And then I put the dome on, and I tape the dome on, and then I put it in the mail and mail it to people. People call me the master. There's an example. I even put some tissue in that one. See the plastic, the dome that can go on top of those?
Uh-huh.
And I put the Kleenex tissue paper around it just to kind of hold it up so it doesn't get bent all over and broken. And they usually arrive in great condition to the person who wants them. I've had a lot of people have good luck with transplanting the plants. So this is just to remind me to say that we tested the essential oil from this plant when we first started messing with it. We extracted the essential oil and took it to an independent leading laboratory that tests plant chemicals. And after they tested it, we went to pick up the results, and the director came out of his office when he saw that we were coming to get the results. He said, "What was that plant?" He said, "It's called Spotted Bee Balm." Another name for it you'll see is horse mint. And He said, we've never tested a more powerful medicinal plant in the world. So this plant, like one woman said to me today, a grandmother sent me a request for 4 bottles of salve, or jars of salve. She said her little grandson, who's 4 months old, had contracted a skin issue that was just causing him a lot of misery. It's like the hives or something like that. And she sent a bottle of the jar to her daughter and said, here, they say this will cure everything. I said, yes, it's called snake oil that actually works. They put it on the little 4-month-old, and he completely cleared up and is not in misery anymore. So this plant, I have never seen anything like it. And I'm not a person who was raised as a medicinal person. In fact, I wondered whether it even worked for quite a few years. My background is in ecology. I'm trained as a plant scientist who specializes in using images acquired by satellites in outer space to study plants around the world. I worked in the Amazon and so on. So I'm telling you that so you know that I'm not coming in as one who is pushing this because this is something I want to make a lot of money on. I'm basically selling all the products for a little more than it costs me so that I can continue doing it. Anyway, there you see a pink version and a brown. That is showing the jar of salve. Go ahead, go back, Lee. Go there. You can see a jar of salve. There's a little over an ounce of salve in the jar, and then that's the front and back of a tincture bottle, which is where you put the plants in a jar and then fill it with organic grain alcohol and let it infuse for like a month and a half, and then you drain it out. You can take it internally or use it externally. We've got people who've had shingles who use it on their shingles. They say it's the only thing that gives them any relief from the pain of shingles. But one guy said, I felt like I had spiders crawling up my leg. He said this stuff shuts down the spiders. So I'll show you a couple more examples. I want to show you why it's worth going to all the hassle to get this plant to grow. Next slide. There's just a jar of salve. The salve that I made this time is more orange. I don't know why, but I think it's because I switched over to using fractionated coconut oil. That is more stable. It doesn't go rancid like olive oil and some of those other oils. So you can have your oil last for several years, where with the others 6 to 8 months and they're starting to smell bad. Now here's a woman who her home was flooded out by a hurricane that came through Louisiana years ago. And in the process of cleaning her home, she contracted some disease that the doctors were never able to diagnose. And they treated her for 6 years, and she could not heal herself. She used the hydrosol made from the Spotted Bee Balm, and in 7 days her hand had completely cleared up. I lost my clicker here.
Sorry.
Are you there again, Lee?
Yep.
Okay. This woman, she cut her thumb a year ago, and you see the upper left picture? That's how her thumb looked after a year. It would never heal. So she started putting the salve on it, and here's a sequence of pictures, and the last one that is by itself, a bigger one. Her thumb was almost completely healed. She was so thrilled. She'd been trying to get that to heal for years. Next slide. Here's a young boy in the area of Nauvoo who wrestled, and they think he picked up MRSA on a wrestling mat. And the left picture shows the MRSA inflamed. He'd been treating it with antibiotics, and it was just getting worse. We dropped some essential oil from Spotted Bee Balm in the wound. The mother said she could put on a pair of rubber gloves and stick her finger up to the first knuckle in the wound on the left. And within a week or so, the MRSA was, the wound was healing. She said she could see a difference in it the next morning after she put it on. And Lee, you probably know there's been hospitals that have had to close because they've been infected by MRSA, and people were contracting MRSA in the hospitals. It's an antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Next slide. Here we are making we're distilling it, and you can see the Spotted Bee Balm essential oil is the wine color that's floating on top of the water, and the water is the hydrosol. And the hydrosol may be more powerful than the essential oil in that it contains microscopic droplets of the essential oil, but it has the water-soluble compounds in it as well. And so this is an example of what we get. The problem with it is that the plant doesn't have an awful lot of this oil in it. We took 2 tons of the plant in an area where it was growing, and it grows mostly in colonies that were colonized by the Hopewell people, and they were definitely cultivating it as part of their medicinal plants. And so you can go out and grow, you'd have to grow tons of it to be able to just use the essential oil. So sometimes put it in blends and things of that sort, but it's most powerful when it's just the pure essential oil and not the blend. Okay, next slide. You see the hydrosol that fills up it dropping off into that gallon jug next to the in the picture on the left. So it's quite a process. Here's the gas chromatograph mass spectrometer. This is the instrument that you use to test it, and found it to be, I can't remember, 56, I think it's 56 compounds in the one we tested. It's loaded with compounds. And 5 Chinese scientists studied this plant. This plant does not grow in China, but when they studied it, they found that it controlled 4 or 5 highly contagious antibiotic resistant bacteria, and it killed them all, but only when they used the entire essential oil with all of its compounds. Here's an example. That's the gas chromatograph, and there's the top 10 compounds that we found in the plant. And it'll vary. There's 9 varieties in the United States, and it'll vary in terms of the amount of carvacrol and thymol that are in it. Notice you don't see thymol until the very bottom on this one. This was a sample that was collected in Florida, but when we collect it on the Temple site, it's loaded with thymol and carvacrol. And 3 of those compounds that you see in there, a distinguished professor at Purdue University said she can cure cancer with them. I know that's a bold claim, but that's her claim, not mine. And she gets the compounds from thyme, and Spotted Bee Balm is much stronger and more potent in those compounds than thyme is. Okay.
Kevin, at this point, this is a good time to interject that, these are also, these compounds, these terpenes and these oil-soluble compounds are also anti-parasitic.
You're coming through kind of garbly, so I couldn't understand everything you said.
I said these compounds are also anti-parasitic.
Yes, that's right. The plant, well, I jokingly say it's snake oil that works, is we found that the Hopewell were using it to cure malaria. We know that. They've written about it. We've got some of the writings where they talk about how they use it to kill a seasonal fever. And there's over 200 people that died in a small town across the river from their temple site from malaria in the 1800s. But it kills, I think it'll kill a lot of parasites. And there's some research out there that's suggesting that some forms of cancer are actually caused by parasites. I don't know if it's true, but there's a German scientist who are saying that they've discovered that. Now, these next ones are just show that not everything we talk about is anecdotal or should testimonial. There's scientific papers out there. The effects of carvacrol, thymol, and essential oils contained, such as monoterpenes on wounds healed, and systematic review. They found that you could heal the wounds much quicker using some of these compounds. Those are all in Spotted Bee Balm. Next slide. Here is the study by the Chinese. No, this is not them. Yeah, it is. You see, there's 5 Chinese scientists that published this paper, and I can send the actual paper. They found that it just wipes out antibiotic-resistant bacteria very quickly within hours. My thoughts on how it works, Lee, you correct me if I'm wrong. It's been a few years since I learned about this in my microbiology classes, but the way a typical antibiotic works is it keeps the cell from reforming the cell wall. The lattice work won't form, and so they can't heal, and so they drain their content out into the area around them. And that's how many antibiotics will work. This plant, it's kind of like having a battering ram, a bunch of police officers that are ready to go into a drug house. They blast the door open, they punch a hole through that double lipid in the cell wall, and then flood the insides of the cell with all the other compounds. And as the Chinese described it, they say they oxidize it, or which means they burn it up. They basically burn the insides of the cell completely up. Next slide. I'm not sure if you're cringing or not, Lee. I talked to a virologist, PhD in virology, asking him, I said, I believe the way this plant kills viruses is it blocks the activation site on the long amino acid chains so that a key can't go in there and unlock the chain, and the viruses are using the shorter amino acid chain to replicate. So if they can't get the shorter chains, they can't replicate. And he said that makes perfect sense. And again, I don't have millions of dollars to test all this stuff, but that's some of the best solutions or answers I can come up with on it. Yeah, see, the EPA approved the use of thymol to kill the coronavirus on surfaces. And so I'm just showing that thymol kills COVID on surfaces. And I've had people who've told me it killed it in them as well in a matter of days. Go ahead, next slide. Let's see. If you read at the bottom, it says the first study showing evidence in the highlighted in yellow for the anti-malarial activity. This is simply saying that thymol, which I've got highlighted in yellow, killed malaria. Next slide. The red areas are showing all the areas in the United States where people were dying or contracting malaria in the 1800s. During the Civil War, they estimate there was over 1 million soldiers who were infected with malaria. And if they'd had this plant, they could have treated it. This is showing how many people died in the town of Nauvoo, about 200 from malaria. It was the biggest killer of people in Nauvoo of any disease. Across the river was the plant growing that could have killed it. Next slide. Here we are collecting. Native Americans value it so much they came out with a group of Native Americans to just collect the seeds with us. So the seeds that you're getting were collected by Native Americans who actually were saying prayers over the plant as they were collecting it.
Hey, Kevin, can I ask a question here about the seed collection? Those of us who plan on having, a bunch of these growing in our backyards and flower beds, I'm assuming we can do the same thing, but at what point do you do this?
Well, the trick is the plant has these little capsules, and when that capsule turns brown, the seeds will fall out like they're falling out of a pepper shaker. And when you can turn the capsule upside down, the seeds fall out. That's when you want to do it. And you want to do it as soon as you can get them to fall out so they don't get blown out by the wind.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. The seeds are real small. I've got them sitting there on a $20 bill, I think it was. And you can see next to a ruler, they're about 1 millimeter in size.
Like more.
Okay. So the seeds, when you're planting them, the reason I tell people to smooth the soil and pat it slightly is to fill in all the crevices and the little holes that the seeds can fall into on your topsoil, your potting soil. And then when you sprinkle them on top and water, you're not going to wash them into low spots also where they'll get covered by soil that is moved by the water. So I know these things sound crazy, but I'm just trying to say you're not going to get any plant, any seed to germinate if it's covered or if it's in a crevice or a hole. So the more you can smooth it, you don't want to pat it really hard, just enough to make it a little bit firm on the surface. Here's a bit of a sales pitch here. In June, we're going to have a conference, and you'll see my picture there. I'm going to be speaking on the scientific evidence supporting the temple site of the Hopewell. And during that talk, I'm going to talk about Spotted Bee Balm as a living artifact of those people. Okay?
This has been really great. I appreciate your time in doing this. This answers a lot of questions for me, and I know I've talked to 3 or 4 people locally in my area who've been frustrated at not being able to get these to germinate and go. I'll show you. I'll just pick this up. This is I had one plant last year that was successful growing, and when I harvested, I made 2.5 quarts of tincture. This is still in the solution, so I still need to press this. But
and the tincture will last 5 years or more.
Right. I was really surprised when I did. I pressed the pint jar, and I was really surprised at how much oil came out. It was very oily.
Yeah.
Tincture. I was expecting more liquid.
The plant is just loaded with important medicinal compounds.
Right.
And
so in summary here, I'm looking at my notes here. Use a tray that has this wonderful formula of soil, topsoil 50%, sand 30%, cocoa coir 15%, and manure compost 5%. Do not use potting mix. Use the topsoil, quote unquote. Place it on a warming mat and water from the top, not from the bottom. And
if you're watering from the bottom, it's really too much water.
Okay, I've made that mistake.
Pull itself up through the capillary action, and so it's got to have a lot of water.
Right.
Yeah.
And then tease the seedlings apart and transplant them into a larger container. How long would they be in that larger container before you put them outside?
Well, those ones I showed you that had the washer next to the one, those were large enough to go outside.
Okay.
And they'll do just fine. I could take them out and plant them. I'm probably going to take them to a conference that we have in southern Missouri in a few weeks, because I think there'll be people there who will want to buy them. And I'm going to have so many you saw how many I've got germinating. So I'm not worried about that. I might hold out a few for myself. But the plants, people who, if they try to keep them in those little pots that I send them in, it'll kill them. They have to get the lid off and get them transplanted pretty soon. The root to shoot ratio on this plant is 3-to-1. For every 1 inch above ground, it has 3 inches of root below ground.
So if you're using this in a raised bed, do you need a really sizable thickness of soil in the bed?
You'll have a happier plant if you have at least a 2-foot high raised bed.
Okay.
You look like, I don't know about that. I can't. You don't have to fill the whole thing with the potting mix. A lot of people take branches and stuff from trees and fill the bottom in with the branches and so on and leaves, and that decomposes and makes a compost in the bottom that the plants feed off of. So don't be afraid to use other stuff. Just worry about the top maybe 5 or 6 inches.
Got it. Okay.
80% of the feeding that plants do is in the top 20 centimeters. But this plant drops its roots down deep, so the top 10 inches is where your plant's feeding. But this plant drops its roots down deep to tap water because it's growing in sandy soils, and that's how it outcompetes its competition.
And spacing wise, a mature plant would be spaced at what distance from the next mature plant?
I would put them 2 feet apart, and here's the reason for that. One of the big killers of the plant that when they become adults is you get the stems and branches of one plant growing into the other plant, and that reduces the ability of the air to move through the canopy. And the air moving through the canopy removes moisture that's on the plant and reduces the powdery mildew infections that they're susceptible to. So you want the plants, the canopy, to be able to breathe.
Got it. Okay. Anything else that we've not asked or that it's important to know?
Yeah, I set mine up on a sprinkling system, and it was before I had my hip surgery, and I couldn't get down to weed, and the crabgrass grew in among the plants, the spotted bee balm, and in that area where they grew in, it killed all the spotted bee balm because they all died from powdery mildew.
Oh my!
So you want to keep the weeds out of it and see when they grow in the sandy soils. That's not a problem for them because most of the plants can't grow there.
What about the use of a mulch?
What about what?
What about a mulch or like a black plastic or a fab layer weed block?
I use that. That's where I lost some of them because this crabgrass came into the spots where I'd planted them. It just grew all over in there, but I think it would be good. The only problem I have with it is that if it drops seeds and reseeds itself, they won't grow because of the mulch.
Well, if they drop seeds and grow, then you're probably going to be transplanting them away so they're not too thickly together.
Yeah, I've had plants that die. They are a short-lived perennial. They'll live for a couple of years and then they won't come up the next year. Now, I've got one out in my backyard that I planted in a big pot. When I say big pot, it's big enough around that I can't get my arms around the top of that pot. And that plant's come back its third year. And you can plant them in pots and move them around as long as they're a deep pot or even like a 5-gallon bucket. But if you plant them in a 5-gallon bucket or any pot, make sure it drains and don't punch the holes in the very bottom. Punch the holes in the side of the bucket down near the bottom. If you punch it in the very bottom, they have a little rim all the way around them that kind of seals them, and so the water can't get, it goes out the holes in the bottom of the bucket and can't get away, and then it backs it up and will kill your plants. But I've got a friend who very successfully grown spotted bee balm in a 5-gallon bucket.
So what you're saying then is, in terms of the perennial ideas, you can get a year or 2 or 3 out of it, but then you're going to be using that same space again to put a new seedling.
That's what I do. I just know that I'm going to have to replant with. That's the reason I keep growing seedlings, so I've got something to replant with.
Got it. Okay.
Like the annuals you plant in your yard, the petunias and all that stuff, you got to replant them every year. Well, this one will give you 2 to 3 years.
Okay, good.
And the second year is when it really, really comes on strong.
Does the medicinal characteristics of a second or third year plant, are they better than a first year plant, or are they the same?
I have not tested that. It's a good question. I don't know.
Okay.
I do know that people seem to be able to get just as good a medicinal results from them no matter how old the plant is. The plant, Okay, so another big mistake people make is they dry the plant. The plant leaves are covered with tiny, tiny, tiny spikelets that are called trichomes. And at the tip of each trichome is a tiny droplet of that secondary metabolite, which we call essential oil. And so when you cut the plant off, the trichomes no longer secrete the essential oil. And if you leave them around and don't process them right away, the essential oil volatilizes and disappears.
So by process, you're talking about a tincture or a hydrosol.
Yep. Put it in and distill it, make it into a hydrosol, or put it in there, make a tincture, or put it in a jar and make a salve out of it.
So for most people who don't have the equipment or the expertise to be able to make a hydrosol easily, or even an oil, to have the glass separating vial and so forth.
Right.
And the most practical thing would be using a 40% ethanol to get it immediately processed and preserved.
Yep. You want to get that oil you want to get it to infuse into the alcohol. Or people can use vinegar. If they don't plan on using it internally, they use witch hazel, but I use it internally, and I just use the vodka. And I prided myself in never ever drinking anything, but many of the medications we take are much worse than the alcohol.
Yeah. Everybody's going to have to wrestle that one in their own time. But the point is, if you clip this plant at the time of harvest, you're against the clock a little bit in getting this thing preserved. Otherwise, if you do let it dry out, like you would other kinds of herbs, really all you're getting is a more of the water soluble, the polyphenols and the flavonoids that you could then put like in a tea, for example.
Yeah. But I want the essential oils from it too.
Yeah, we want them both.
Yeah, I want them both.
One thing I would suggest to people is that there are some do-it-yourself ways of doing a hydrosol at home using a large pot with an inverted glass lid and a collection cup underneath it, and you put ice in the inverted lid. So the condensation will drip into your collection cup that's in the middle of the pot. So that's kind of a DIY method, or there's places that you can get machines or devices that you can actually create the hydrosol. So
sure. You and I both bought what is it called, an ADI or?
Yep.
And I've used mine to make peppermint hydrosol because my daughter gets migraines, and peppermint helps to reduce the pain of the hot migraines. I don't have any Spotted Bee Balm, but as soon as I do, I'll make Spotted Bee Balm hydrosol. The other thing on the salves, I add another compound, another plant. I add comfrey. It's also called bone knit, and it's been used for 2,000 years. There's some scary stuff out there about how it'll mess up your liver or something, but I'm not sure. I think it was based on only a few trials, and people have been using it for thousands of years without a problem.
So for those watching the video here, I'm going to share my screen again and just slide over a website that, let's see, I'm not sure if I did it right.
And Lee, feel free to edit that as you want to.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to share that and then bring this.
Talk too much about the medicinal applications. You want to reduce that, take them out.
All right, can you see this right here?
Yeah, that's made by Dr. Leo too.
Yeah, so this is a website at leetimestill.com, LETIME still.
Yeah.
And he has the equipment here that you could do this at your own home.
Yeah.
This is the machine right here that both Kevin and I have right here that you can make hydrosols with just the push of a button. He's now starting to market those. And there's there's other equipment here that he has where like this one here on the right has a boiler pot with a column on the top of it there to the right that you place your plants in. That was like that one picture in the slide presentation where you could see the fractionated oil and hydrosol being separated.
Uh-huh.
So this is available to the public, and it kind of answers the question of, so that you have all this stuff, how do you make your own medicine? And so this is just one application, for being able to do that.
Yeah, and I was waiting for his larger one to come available. He had one with like 3 gallons, and
There's a 3-gallon.
and I was going to buy that, and then I decided to go with the all-in-one.
Right. Well, Kevin, thank you very much. I'm going to stop the recording. I appreciate everybody who has participated, and I hope that people find value in this. Your expertise is much appreciated. Thank you.
Oh, well, you're asking me to explain my hobby.
Thanks again.
All right.